Hi everyone, my name is Daniela and I have recently read the book Pray by Ayaan Hirsi. The complete title of the book is Pray, Immigration, Islam and the Erosion of Women's Rights. I thought it was actually quite relevant to read it, especially now, with all the big fuss, well, not big, it's not a fuss, but with the whole worldwide news about the UK and the grooming gangs that are there. This problem is actually, has been around for several years, not just recently. Recently it has reached the worldwide population, or that's what I think. I want to believe most people know about it. As in, even if they don't know the details, at least they know that something is going on there. So anyway, I decided that because all this news that I have been watching and reading loosely, that it was an important moment to read this Pray. Pray is about, it talks about similar thing. It doesn't talk specifically about the grooming gangs, but it does talk about the issue of predatory men from a particular background going around predating on women, on vulnerable women and girls. Because unfortunately this problem that the UK is facing is not only of UK, it is from different parts, different countries in the European Union. Particularly it's gonna be Austria, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, France, and I think those are the ones that have this problem the most. I don't know about others, or I can't remember, but I made a presentation, which, by the way, well, doesn't matter. It's because I don't know yet if I'm gonna be sharing like the presentation or if it's just gonna be my face. We shall see. And so anyway, I'm gonna go through what I read about the book that I found relevant because I think it's important to share it. And I don't know, let's hope I'm gonna be clear enough. Most of the things, if I'm gonna be reading, it's gonna be like direct quotes from the book, not everything, but at least a good amount. And yes, if you haven't read anything about Ayaan Hirsi, I think if you are European, particularly Western European, I think it's very important for you to read this book. And I would argue it's a must for all the countries that I have previously mentioned. So yes, let me see if I can start recording the presentation. Okay, so I want to talk, okay, before I actually begin, this is actually a very complex topic. If anything, I would argue that the reason why it's so complex is because people don't want to talk about it. They choose to either remain ignorant, or if they are not ignorant, they want to censor others or self-censor, which of course it is of no use for all the victims and to actually address and solve this problem, that it's like in a very big scale. So it is important for all of us to be aware and to actually talk about it. Okay, because it's a very large, or well, this problem, and the book, I'm not gonna be mentioning every single thing about the book. I try to simplify it and to make it more digestible, in case you don't want to read it, although I would very much encourage you to read it. So yes, I will do my best. Also, it's the first time I'm actually doing this like presentation, recording, everything, so bear with me. Pray is talking about different countries. However, she's also mentioning that she's centering a little bit more on the 2015 migration, 2015-2016, because it was during those years that a huge amount of refugees arrived to Europe. There were some issues before and after, but the big numbers came during that time. This book was also released in 2021. However, as we have mentioned, it is very relevant today. The numbers are gonna be, I mean, I don't know how outdated or not. They still hold, like to show how the gravity of this problem. Having said that, let's begin. First, I'm gonna mention some of the treaties so that you can understand also the situation of the countries at a bureaucratic level. Okay, so it's the Geneva Convention. This one says that refugees cannot be returned to a country where they can expect to receive unfair trial, persecution, torture, or death. Then it's a Dublin regulation, which says that asylum seekers must be processed at their first European Union member states. Now, we're gonna see how this one doesn't apply necessarily, because several refugees go around different types of countries applying for asylum. And even when they have been rejected. So we'll see. The next treaty is the Treaty of Amsterdam. This one says that transferred national powers of immigration legislation, foreign policy, and security policy to the European Union. I mean, I would have to check. I'd like to actually delve a little more on this treaty, because I mean, just like that, it doesn't sound like the best. Then it's the Treaty of Lisbon. Created a legally binding charter for fundamental rights. The charter includes, among other things, a right to asylum. Fair enough. And then we have the Schengen Agreement, which it says that abolished the internal borders among the European states. Now, when this agreement was created, there were only 5 countries in the European Union, whereas now there are 26. So just by that, we can see it can be it can be a loophole in my opinion. And if I can actually insert my opinion about this, is that I don't think the abolish of internal borders should apply for immigrants or for refugees, for refugees, asylum seekers, all of that, because you are putting countries that they don't even accept, the asylum paperwork, and then they move there. I mean, I don't know exactly, obviously, the details of this agreement, but it doesn't sound that good. And I will prove how. Well, someone else actually agrees with me. Someone that she said it in 1985, and it's the Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. She refused to sign the UK up to the Schengen Agreement because she said, and I am quoting her directly, "It is a matter of plain common sense that we cannot totally abolish frontier controls if we are also to protect our citizens from crime and stop the movement of illegal immigrants." And I think she was completely right. Like, you cannot, even if you want to help a good amount of people, you need to have your own country in order first. So now we're gonna go to the distinctions of the different types of immigrants that there are in Europe, although it could apply, I would say, everywhere. The first one is the authorized or legal immigrants, which are non-citizens with a European Union residency status for more than 12 months. So I don't think anyone has a big problem with legal immigrants, or at least I don't have a problem. I have been a legal immigrant in Canada. Then we have the asylum seekers. They are non-citizens who have applied for asylum in the European Union under the procedures of the Dublin regulation. If the application is successful, they are granted refugee status, which gives them the right to live in the European Union. This means that they can get access also obviously to welfare, housing, benefits, and I think the same as European citizens. Then we have the illegal immigrants, which I think most or a good amount of people have a problem with them, which is non-citizens living without a residency permit, who have overstayed their visas, refused deportation orders, and have entered illegally. These are obviously people that should go back since they were already rejected. Or some, of course, they weren't even rejected, they were just under the radar, and they, not even the government has like any knowledge of how many are there. I mean, they have obviously an idea based on the ones that have actually encountered authorities, but a good amount, they really like go under the radar. So now we have some statistics. These statistics are of the people that have crossed illegally between 2009 and 2018. These figures are from Frontex, and during that time it was 3.5 million illegal border crossings. Eurostat figures says that during that same period of time it was 5.8 million first-time asylum application. In 2015, which is the big, like when the most amount of people went to Europe, it was 1.8 million recorded illegal border crossing. 1.8 in only 1 year. The other numbers were like in a period of 9 years. So obviously the number was insane. And just think about it from, like, even from a bureaucratic point of view, like you cannot even stop that many people and then to actually process them, which obviously we're talking about, it is illegal immigrants, which makes it even harder because obviously some are just gonna go under the radar. Anyway, on average, 67% of asylum seekers are men, and 80% were under 35 years old. Later on, we're gonna see why this is so important. Migrants come from countries where there is an ongoing war. The majority of them come from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, and Nigeria. I want to mention some of the cases so that you can understand the gravity and urgency for authorities to actually solve the issue. Okay, in Germany, also trigger warning, I guess, because the stories are not nice, obviously, these are crimes that involve sex abuse. I don't know why YouTube is so strict. Anyway, so this is the first case, and also I want to mention that I am not even gonna mention all the cases that are in the book, and the book obviously doesn't mention all the cases that have actually been in all these countries, so it's insane. And the first case, it's in Germany, where a man of 21 years old raped a girl of 18, then proceeded to call her his friends, telling them that there is a woman who can be F. 11 men between 19 and 29 years old arrived and for several hours raped her, or provided cover for these rapers. Of the 11, 8 were sentenced to prison between 3 and 4 years. 2 received suspended sentences of 4 to 6 months, and 1 was acquitted. From the 11, 8 were Syrian, 1 Iraqi, 1 Algerian, and 1 German. Now we're just beginning, okay? This is a horrible case, not only for the crime itself, but because the authorities didn't give these people a good punishment, if they gave them a punishment. And like these ones are gonna be many. Okay, another case in Germany. A Somali of 19 years old broke into a retirement home and is surely assaulted. Can I say assaulted? Well, a 74 years old woman because he wanted sex. That was his motive. He couldn't resist the urge. Then we have in the city of Cologne on New Year's Eve, on December 31st, 2015, well, 2015, around 1,500 men, which most of them have arrived as asylum seekers from Arab and North African backgrounds, they attacked women by separating them from their husbands and male friends to place them in hell circles, which means that the men grow. It's because I don't know if I can say the words, but anyway, women and girls without any regard of their age. And when the women spoke about the incident and mentioned the ethnicity of these men, they were labeled as racist. In addition, authorities' statement about that evening was, of course, that it was largely peaceful. Like 1,500 men attacked women, and it was largely peaceful. Again, it's a horrible case of the crime itself and of the response of the authorities. Now, we're still in Germany with these cases. A Somali of 17 years old, he was a resident of the asylum facility. He beaten and raped a woman of 43 years old that followed when she was leaving the place, that he followed her when she was leaving the place. Another case, a girl of 16 was leaving the asylum seeker center, and she was raped by 3 Afghan men between the ages of 17 and 27. One of them was a rejected asylum applicant. An Iranian of 29 stabbed to death his ex-girlfriend of 17 for starting a new relationship. The judge who sentenced him commented that he no longer recognized her as an independent personality. In his eyes, she was his. Now we go to France. In France, a Moroccan of 28, whose asylum applicant was rejected in Netherlands and Germany, was convicted for sexually assaulting a girl of 11. He received 6 months in prison. A Sudanese of 26, again still in France, he sexually assaulted a 14 years old girl. Two 14 years old girls in broad daylight on a street Silne-Noble near Lille. Now in Sweden, a Somali of 17 followed a girl of 13 into a shopping center bathroom, where he raped her. Days later, called her a fat, disgusting whore. Similar threats were made to another girl he had previously assaulted, and in addition to this, he had numerous defenses such as theft, abusive behavior, is actually harassment, and child rape. He bragged being above the law, and 4 months after his conviction, he was granted a 3-year residence permit. So, I mean, what do you do when authorities don't do nothing to fix this? And like, I mean, for me, it's like unbelievable to think that someone with so many like criminal records, some even lesser than what he actually did, you know, like the main one that angers me the most, and still he got a residence permit of 3 years, like just so that you can understand why people are angry. I mean, especially obviously the victims. Like, so some of these predators target vulnerable girls who are alone at night, who are young and still insecure. Others choose to attack for the simple fact that they have an urge. Now, they don't show remorse at any moment. I am not gonna be going on the specific cases in which they didn't show remorse during the court. If you want to know the specific cases, go and read the book. But they didn't show any remorse, not during the crime, because at times some of these men, the ones that actually went to jail, it's because they took selfies and videos of their actions, just so that you see how like sick these people are, these predators, because they are below people. Now they also don't show remorse in the court, and some of their statements have been, at least in one particular case, it was like, I'm quoting directly, "That's just a woman." The perpetrators view their victims as worthless objects that they could actually misused and cast aside. A perpetrator even recited the Quran while he was beating his victim. Now, these are again just a handful, a very small list of the cases that have been. And even right now, I went only from different European countries, not even mentioning UK at this point. The commonalities of these predators are like that they come from a Muslim majority countries, that they are young men, that they are strangers to the victim. And this is important to mention because women in general tend to experience, like the violence they experience, it's more of it comes more often from partners or ex-partners, or people that they actually know. In these cases, they have been strangers, which is more as in opportunistic attacks, and moments where they are like either alone, drunk, or incapacitated. Needless to say that it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man, a child, an old person, an adult person, like it really doesn't matter if they are alone in the middle of the night, drunk, and even without clothes. No one has the right to actually do something to them. I would assume this is like common sense. So, anyway, obviously these predators could go after these people, but my point is also that authorities should never victim blame. Then the majority of women, the targets of these predators, the majority of women were white women, but girls in asylum centers as young as 9 years old suffered from sexual assault. Then we go with some more statistics. In Denmark, the sexual offenses, the offenses doubled from 2015 to 2017. Again, this is relevant because as we saw previously, the biggest amount of illegal immigrants came in 2015, 1.8 million. So the offenses doubled in Sweden from 2015 to 2017. In England and Wales, rapes increased by 48% and 33% of sexual assaults from 2015 to 2017. In France, grapes increased 17% and 20% in other forms of its sexual violence between 2017 and 2018. In Germany, rape and sexual coercion cases increased after 2015, reaching a 41 increase in 2017. I will be also showing the statistics of this somewhere. Okay, and now we go to other statistics that are very relevant. Rape committed by strangers in the UK is 13%. In Germany is 20%. In Denmark, 32%. Now, health, well-being, and personal safety statistics, and it's important to mention that this is a conservative minimum, is that strangers made up for 19.5% of physical violence, 14.5% for sexual abusers. Germany ranking top for physical violence against women. Prostitutes, prisoners, and female refugees experience physical and sexual abuse at a higher rate. I mean, they are even more vulnerable because obviously these people are just gonna go after vulnerable people. Okay, now what is important to mention of all this is that it's the disproportion what makes it so worrisome, and what it may, as in not even just worrisome, but what it is required action, because you can make, like, you can act directly to solve this problem if you know from where it is coming, which we know. The only problem, I mean, actually there are several problems, but one of the main problems is that no one wants to talk about it. How are you gonna solve it if you don't want to talk about it? Okay, so anyway, in the countries that collect data on migrant status, there is evidence of causal relationship between the migration and the increase of this type of violence. And we're gonna go to this. Okay, again, this is the disproportion. It's not that they are the only type of men that do these atrocities, but it is more likely for this type of men to do these atrocities, and who do it like at a systematic rate. I mean, again. So anyway, if you get triggered, if you get all think that this is controversial, this is the disproportion. Okay, disproportion. In Austria, the asylum seekers were suspects in 11% of all the reported rapes and sexual harassment cases, despite being 1% of the population. So they are less than 1% of the population, and they were suspects in 11% of the cases. Disproportion. In Denmark, non-Western immigrants and their descendants have 2/5 of the conviction for rape and between 1/4 and 1/3 for groping, even though they are less than 13% of the population. Like, it's not normal that the population is so low and yet their percentage is so high in crimes. In France, foreigners account for 7% of the population, but they are suspects of 14% of sex crimes. And in 2018, 9% of those convicted of sex crimes were of African origin. In Germany, asylum seekers made up for 1 to 2% of the population. So again, 1 to 2%. But they made nearly 12% of sex crimes in 2018. The overrepresentation in this type of crimes started in 2015. What happened in 2015? 1,800,000 arrived. In Sweden, and we're talking just about illegals. In Sweden, between 2012 and 2017, there were 58 individual gang rape cases that reached the court. Of the ones convicted, 3/4 were born overseas, and 41% were asylum seekers. And okay, another thing that I also want to mention is that the 1.8 million that arrived are illegal. However, as we have seen, some asylum seekers get accepted, and they get accepted even when they have committed several crimes, and it is in the record. Plus, the ones that get accepted, and let's say they don't have criminal records, but that doesn't mean they haven't done anything or that they won't do anything. Now, the immigrant share of convicted offenders of SEX crimes, it was 58%, were foreign-born in Sweden. So, again, like, it's a disproportion. It is insane. Like, you are welcoming criminals. Obviously, not everyone, but it's a big proportion. Like, it's a big number of these people that commit these heinous crimes. And now, this is a direct quote. It is not exclusively limited to one culture, social class, or background, but that doesn't mean that culture can't play any role in stereotypical beliefs or sexist behavior. Asylum seekers have also been victims of this sexual abuse. It's important to mention again that it's the disproportionality that we have to pay attention in order to minimize the number of attacks. Obviously, as we have seen, the vast majority of these perpetrators come from Muslim majority countries. So, what can we assume from that? That they are Muslims. Obviously, it's not the only reason for them to attack. Another reason is misogyny. And this is like in general misogyny. Academic research have linked unbalanced sex ratios with violent crime. So what this means is that if there are because one thing that it's like, I don't know, like common in general, like in all the countries, is that more men commit violent crimes than women. So what happens if there are more men than women in a place? It's obviously that there will be more violence, based on this academic research. So that is one thing to take into account. However, the majority of migrants and asylum seekers, /asylum seekers, are men. There is a reason for this. And the main reason is that because families have to spend a lot of money in smugglers, they tend to send the strongest member of the family. And in most cases, it's the man, or it's a man. Also because there is high risk in the travel, so they don't want to risk the honor of the woman, which we will see later on. But as in from a logistic point of view and a practical point of view, it makes sense that they send the man. That doesn't mean that the families know that the man is a perpetrator. Some yes, some no. But this is an issue. Like, it's not, it's mostly the ethnicity, but it's also that it's huge amount of men. And in Germany in 2014, men between 14 and 20 years old made up of 9% of the population. Yet they have responded. Okay, actually I will repeat it because it's very important, shocking, and I think it's the clearest example about this this sex ratio. In Germany, in 2018, men between 14 and 20 years old, they made 9% of the population, but they were responsible for half of all the country's crime, violent crime. I have never said that all men are the same or that men are the problem. However, men tend to be more violent than women. That's a fact. And if a man is born and raised or has a family that promotes misogyny, then it is, I mean, one can assume that it's going to be more likely for them to commit crimes. And that brings us to Islam. Islam, if you don't know, it does promote misogyny. I think the most basic and easy example to showcase this is the fact that women cannot show their hair. That's why they wear hijabs or burqas. And one of the reasons is so that they don't provoke men. Because, you know, if you show your hair, a man can get aroused, and for some reason they are allowed in these cultures to do horrible things to women that show their hair. And we have seen this in many cases in Iran, where women without hijab get beaten and killed because of that. So this is a common wealth factor that everyone, I think, should know by now about Islam. But that is just one simple example of how Islam promotes misogyny. I know this is going to be controversial for a lot of you, but it's very important that you understand Islam. What Islam does compared to other religions is that it fuses politics with religion. Politics. And what it goes there is like the inferiority of women is enshrined in the holy law in the Muslim world. As I have previously mentioned, you can see that just by the hijabs and burqas. Now, one other way in which they promote this inferiority of women is with polygamy. So polygamy is not only permitted but encouraged. They can defend having up until 4 wives by citing the Quran. Dan Seligson, sorry if I butchered the names, he's a social scientist, and he argues that polygamy gives rise to violence and less prosperous societies. I will explain why, but I will just also say that polygamy is also like the commodification and objectification of women. The reason why it's it's not only not healthy to have 4 wives from a health point of view and from a even societal point of view, it's because what happens is that when a man marries one woman, obviously a person in any relationship requires time and energy. So the more you have to spread the time and energy among the women. So one of the things that happens in polygamy and in Islam, obviously, is that even the status of the wives is different. You know, the first one is more important and so on. Maybe not always, maybe sometimes the third one is the most important. Doesn't matter. The point is that you cannot give all of them a healthy amount of love. That is if they even want to give love. Anyway, another reason is that in Islam also the men are the one that have to work. Women are supposed to stay at home and do the chores of the home. That is their work. That is all they have to do. So if you're a man and you want to have several wives, you need money. Also, so what happens is the more wives you have, the more status you have, because you have money to sustain those people. And what happens is that obviously, so a man of 20 years old is not going to have that much money compared to a man of 50 years old. So the older men are the ones that are getting these women because they can provide for them. And what happens with this is like more men or older men have the women, and the younger men, they don't get that many, if they get any. Also, another issue with this is that, well, the main issue before I go on is that the younger the men are, it's also the more likely they are to commit violent crimes. And this is important because also having more wives, because it's a status, because it's money and all that, it also means that these older men go after younger women. And sometimes in Islam, it's very, very young women, because they are not women, they are girls. Because I don't know if you have seen some of the news, but I think the most recent one that I have watched is in Iraq. In Iraq, they want to lower the age for girls to marry to 9 years old. So, just so that you have an idea, anyway, older men go for younger women. And obviously, if a man has, well, for girls, okay, girls or younger women, if a man has 2 or more wives, what does this mean? So, let's say they just have 2. If one man has 2 women, that means that one man will be left without a woman. And what this causes is frustration. Is sexual frustration also, and this can how can I say, can explode in different forms, like violent crimes, among other things. So, another thing that we should know about Islam. We have mentioned the burqas, and we're gonna go to that. In Islam, they differentiate between a modest and an immodest woman. Because obviously. Anyway, one of the ways that they divide these women is with the clothing. A modest woman, they have to cover their hair, their arms, their shoulders, and the legs. Short-sleeved, like not even what I'm wearing, short-sleeved doesn't meet the requirement. That's why hijabs and burqas exist. And that way they don't provoke men to rape them. So apparently, if a woman in Islam gets raped or not, it's all on the woman. They could have prevented it, like wearing a burqa, which later we're gonna see how not even wearing a burqa prevents that. Now, another thing that happens is that in Islam, women need chaperones to go outside. If they don't have one with them, they are considered immodest. Chaperones are men. Like, you cannot go outside without a man. And also, wives should follow their husband 3 feet behind. If a woman breaks the rules or is perceived to have broken the rules, her family withdraws their protection. And what happens if a family withdraws the protection from a woman? Like, imagine, like it is even more vulnerable. Well, we're gonna see actually. The next point is that immodest women are seen as fair game by other men. So if you don't dress correctly, if you don't go outside with a man, if you don't walk 3 feet behind your husband, if you're perceived, not even if you have done anything against the rules, you're gonna be an immodest woman. And if you're an immodest woman and it's fair game, then I guess there is no justice. which is actually what we're gonna talk next. So they follow the Quran and Islam, Muslims. One of the quotes that it's in the Quran is, this is a direct quotation also. Your wives are a tilt unto you, so approach your tilt when or how you wish. Another direct quote. When the man invites his wife to his bed, she should satisfy him, even if she were on the camel's saddle. Now, ISIS used these types of passages to justify themselves for trafficking and raping Yazidi women in Iraq. Needless to say, it's not just in Iraq. We have Boko Haram in Nigeria. We have the Taliban in Afghanistan. Among many, Hezbollah in Lebanon. We have many of them. Then the women were treated as the Quran ordains non-Muslim women to be treated. So, they treat their own women, Muslim women, pretty badly. Imagine to non-Muslim women. Not imagine, I am mentioning it. I have been mentioning it through the entire video. So when a woman is raped in the Muslim world under the Sharia law, Sharia, it's like a law. It's a law that they promote. I will be mentioning what Sharia is. It's horrible. So one of the requirements when a woman is raped under the Sharia law is that she needs 4 witnesses. 4 witnesses. And that is not, as if that is not bad enough. If she brings the case to a Sharia court without witnesses, the judge, obviously depends on how insane the judge is or not, the judge could not only say that there was no rape at all, but he can also punish the woman for having a sexual relationship with an unspecified man. So the woman that was raped gets punished if she brings it to court without witnesses. Another example, a pregnant unmarried woman can be ostracized for having sex when in fact she was raped. That happens in the Muslim world. In Dubai, and it gets worse, because why not, because of course it has to get worse. In Dubai and Sudan, Sharia courts sentence women for enticing men to rape them. So it's a woman's fault. It's a woman's fault that a man cannot have self-control over his own urges. You know why? Because they showed her. But of course, again, it gets worse. In Algeria, Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Palestine, and Syria, rapists can avoid jail if they marry their victims. In Egypt, 99.3% reported being sexually harassed, and 62% of the men admitted it. However, a woman covering up her body doesn't prevent her from being harassed or assaulted in those cultures. Because even if you have tons of women going around in burqas, you still have your urges, So, in summary, what Islam promotes is polygamy, religious sanctioned bigotry with clothing, unchecked sexual harassment, lack of sex education, repressed sexual urges, honor shame dichotomy. Because I don't think I have mentioned that, but in Islam, if a woman, this is just one example, okay? I'm not gonna go into all of them, but if a woman doesn't want to marry the man that her father appointed her, then she can be killed as an honor killing. It's called an honor killing because she's putting shame on the family. Islam, ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know, now you know a little bit of it. So anyway, the extreme expression of those beliefs it's called, I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce it correctly or not, and I don't care, is Taharrush Gamea, which is called the Great Game in Arabic. These have been recorded in Algeria and Tunisia since the 1960s. Okay, all of this, what I want to say is that obviously it's misogynistic, like this type of issues. And so, and as we have seen, like, if you have men that come from cultures that promote misogyny, obviously, if you don't integrate them, you're gonna see explicit misogyny going around your own country. Now, these Muslim men go to Europe and behave in such a manner because they believe that they will be able to get away with it, just like they did back home. And guess what? So far, Europe has proved them right, because the sentences, if they get any sentences, are not even up to the level of what the punishment should be for this type of men. Now we'll go to the lack of integration, because obviously if you're gonna import this amount of people, immigrants, they should integrate. Like, a person with common sense could assume that they would want to integrate. But what happens if they don't? And the reason that they don't want also is because of their religion, which I will be mentioning. Okay, the lack of integration, it's because it's just insane. Like, it's really insane to see how to how many levels it affects them. It affects everything. Like, and the worst case, in the not the worst case, but the worst part of this problem is that people don't even want to acknowledge it. So anyway, we're gonna go to the lack of integration. The unemployment rates among Muslim migrants are higher because they refuse to work. Okay, because they refuse to work in certain places, okay, to be precise. And I'm gonna mention the list of which places are not good for them. One, in places where alcohol is sold, where men and women mingle, if they have a female boss. In addition, Muslim women aren't expected to work, as I have mentioned, because that duty is of the man. And in fact, they are discouraged in case their honor may be jeopardized. Refugee women are often pregnant the year after they arrive, and 70% of asylum seeker men said it would be a problem if their wife earned more than them. Now, going a little bit back to this list. The reason they don't want to work in places where alcohol is sold is because it's haram, which is prohibited. It's prohibited for a Muslim to drink alcohol. Or apparently being near a drop of alcohol. The second one, even though they get drunk, and that's how they also grape women, but logic doesn't apply to them. Now, men and women cannot mingle. They cannot mingle also in their mosques. Women are in the back part, or if not, in another section, for women. Because if a woman is besides a man during a prayer, the man obviously is gonna get distracted by the woman, no matter her age. It doesn't matter if she's a girl of 9 years old or if she's a old woman of 80 years old. And even if she's in a burqa, if she is close to him, the urges can arrive. So anyway, let's continue with this now. And well, imagine if it's a female boss, like a complete insult. Another area in which they underperformed is in education, because they are taught different curriculums from the compared to the majority of the population, as in the country, due to sensitive topics such as sex education, homosexuality, terrorism, and slavery. Also, discipline is low in order to keep the peace in these schools. One example is a Dutch school which was closed in 2015 due to social tensions among its ethnic population. Teachers couldn't guarantee the students' safety. So yeah, what do you do? We will see. We will see. Don't worry. We will see a solution to all of this. It starts obviously by talking about it. Okay, another issue is the neighborhoods. When they get, because in the neighborhoods, these are vulnerable areas or no-go zone areas, particularly for women, but it's also for white. And authorities they want to avoid words like ghettos, vulnerable areas, no-go zones of these neighborhoods, even when it's well known that crime is higher there. Okay, so now in Swedish, police defined parallel societies, which are these neighborhoods, as alternative societies where criminals and religious leaders run the streets. In these parallel societies, there is no respect for their new country or their culture. For example, in Sweden, the number of parallel societies or vulnerable areas has gone from 15 to 23 in recent years. And this book was written was published in 2021. So who knows? The number might be higher. Most likely it's higher. Now, there is another thing that says, or everyone speaks Arabic, so why should I learn Swedish? That was a direct quotation from one of the people living in these neighborhoods. I guess makes sense if your entire neighborhood speaks Arabic and you work also there, and you don't are not that much in contact with with Swedish people. But I would expect, just as I expect people to speak Spanish here, immigrants, I would assume Swedish expect their immigrants to learn Swedish. Well, in Copenhagen neighborhoods, they use the phrase being too Danish as a slur. In Stockholm, Rinkeby, I think, sorry if I mispronounce, young men approach white people asking why are they in their neighborhood. In the UK, Manningham belongs to Muslims. We don't want whites. We rule Bradford. We are going to get you out. That was a direct quotation of what they have said. Many Muslims believe that they are superior as both spiritual and political doctrine. Islam presents itself as a superior. Even if the West offers greater economic and personal freedom to Muslim migrants, its moral system is seen as inferior. Because apparently, allowing women to show their hair, it's morally inferior. Anyway, many Muslims are told by their friends and family before going to these European countries, direct quotation, take care when entering morally degrading society. My opinion, I don't know, my statement of this is like, if it's so morally degrading, why are you going there? Now, these parallel societies, what it makes, it's at the end of the day, it's like a cultural cocoon. As we have seen, they don't even learn the language, and this generates other problems, like for example, children attend schools with few pupils outside their ethnic and religious group. So they keep, it's like an echo chamber. In UK, 60% of ethnic minority students attend schools in which most students are minority. In addition to this, the TV and movies they watch are from overseas, meaning in Arabic language. If they get to go on vacations, they will be going to their home countries or their parents' country of origin. When the size of and then this, of course, all of this is like when the size of an immigrant community increases, its members' interactions with the native population decreases, meaning they are creating like tiny countries from where they escape in European countries because of these neighborhoods, because they do not mingle with the native population. An Austrian politician, Evgeny Donmez, himself a Turkish immigrant, observed that more than 400 Turkish associations and community groups exist in Austria. These groups are organized around religion, culture, and politics, and still they come at the bottom of integration. They have the worst outcomes in education, crime, and labor market. Of course, there is a correlation. As we have seen, it's Islam, because it promotes misogyny, because it promotes segregation. Like, it's like you keep with yourself, don't mingle with non-Muslims because morally inferior. If you keep to yourself, obviously you're gonna keep encouraging this same type of mentality. They don't even learn the language. I would say that's a minimum. It's the minimum any immigrant should do, to learn the language of the country you're migrating to. And I mean, not immediately, but at least eventually. Now we're gonna compare them with other immigrants. Let's start with the Jews. The Jews hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. They have enjoyed exceptional economic, social, and cultural success in the Western world. And they have been heavily mistreated. One example is the Holocaust. So we cannot say that we cannot use discrimination as an excuse for Muslims for the lack of integration. Because even I would argue that they don't suffer from discrimination. If anything, they are the ones that discriminate white people, in their own country, Europe. I mean, Sweden, Austria, to name it. That are the Jews. So the Jews, I mean, we know that they excel at whatever they set their mind into. Now we go with the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese fled war, communism, and poverty. When they arrived and lived on welfare and had no language skills nor high education, yet after a couple of decades, they integrated and learned the language. Many maintained their customs, language, and religious beliefs. Obviously, I'm not saying, nor Ayaan, that it will take decades for them to learn the language, of course not. But it's like they are by now well integrated into those societies. Even when they kept their own culture, you can keep your culture and still acquire your new culture. They shouldn't be opposed. It shouldn't be an issue. If your original culture doesn't tell you that it's an issue. Okay, the Dutch, this is an interesting one. The Dutch sociologist Ruud Koopman, what he observed. Christians and Muslims fled the civil war from Lebanon to Australia in 1970s. They arrived with the same circumstances. Muslims Lebanese underperformed compared to the Christian Lebanese on education, labor markets, and income. This is actually very important to highlight. They were experiencing the same in Lebanon, their country, their home country. And they have the same culture in Lebanon. But what is the one thing that they didn't have in common? Their religion. And then one underperformed over, and one outperformed the other one. Now we go to the UK. In the UK, three groups of people are the ones that we're gonna see: Pakistanis, Indians, and Bangladeshis. They started with the same conditions. Hindus and Sikhs outperformed or were on par with the native populations. But Muslims, especially Muslim women, underperformed. Like people that come from the same country but with different religions, and we can see who are the ones that integrate and who are the ones that don't. Now we go to the grooming gangs. I will not be, I don't know, like talking too much about this, because she didn't, Ayaan didn't talk that much about grooming gangs. I think it's one chapter, if it's even a chapter. I think it's a chapter. So anyway, again, this was in 2021 when it was published. And we are seeing the scandal in now 2025. This has been going around for a lot of years. Okay, numerous have been exposed in the UK in Rochdale. Numerous grooming gangs have been exposed in UK in Rochdale, Telford, Newcastle, Peterborough, Sheffield, Rotherham, Huddersfield, Oxford, and Bristol. Now, I recently saw a video where the number of cities or these places, it has increased. It's not just in these places in the UK. In the UK, it has become worse than in other countries, at least that we don't know so far. Anyway, these men that are in the grooming gangs, they lured their victims with gifts such as food, alcohol, drugs, phone cards, but these gifts turned out to be payment for sex. Girls as young as 11 years old have been coerced into having sex with groups of men. They target girls from lower class. They go after vulnerable girls. Because in the UK, it's particularly children, the one they go after. As I have been mentioning, as in the book mentions, it's women of all ages. But in the UK, it's particularly children. That's why it's so important to everyone to understand the root of the problem. That is if you care for children's safety, of course, or women's safety, or your population's safety, for when it's right. Come on. Anyway, in the UK, there is the counter-extremism organization Quilliam, I believe, published a report in 2017 examining the background of the perpetrators. Of the 264 perpetrators convicted, 84% were Asian. Because I will talk about it. Well, these Asian are particularly from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And how we have been seeing in the news, these men are particularly from Pakistan. 8% were black, 7% white, and 1% unknown. Most of these men had Arabic names. Although not everyone were from the Arab world, many had been born in Great Britain to Pakistani migrants. Most of their victims are white. I don't know why some people have a problem acknowledging that racism exists everywhere. It's not only white people being racist towards brown, black. Obviously it applies the same way. Black, brown people, Latin can be racist against other people, it's not just something that white people do. It's not like only white people can behave badly. Clearly we have seen that other types of cultures of races can behave in atrocious ways. In Newcastle, one member of a grooming gang told a female ticket inspector, and I am quoting directly, "All white women are only good for one thing, for men like me to F and use like trash. That's all women like you are worth." This is a type of people that European countries are importing. And it will continue to be that way until you want to actually look at the problem. Now, they come from gender segregated societies that abhors the free movement of women in public, and they see no reason to alter their views. I have provided several evidence during the entire video. Okay, what makes things worse? Now we're gonna go to, because this is what these Muslim men have been doing, which are the crimes, which are horrible. But what is that the rest of the people, white non-Muslims, are doing, or is that they are remaining ignorant about the problem? One thing is to be ignorant, one thing is to not want to talk about the problem, which we're gonna see later on. Right now, it's the ignorance. If you didn't know what Islam was, now you know a little bit more. And I mean, obviously, it's not all Muslim people. A lot of Muslims have actually integrated to societies. A lot of Muslims have left Islam. And it was thanks to the free world. However, I mean, I want to believe that the majority of people have the brain to distinguish between someone that wants to impose their backward way of thinking versus one that has a religion but wants to integrate because want to enjoy the freedom that the free world can provide. So, going back to the ignorance. This book was published in 2021. And so this, what I'm gonna say, it's from back then. I want to believe this is no longer the case. Many Swedes hadn't heard of grooming gangs in the UK or the lover boys in Netherlands. I don't think I have mentioned the lover boys, but it's kind of the same. It's when these men would make, they would make believe the younger girls that they are their boyfriend, only so that they can traffic them eventually, pimp them around. So those are the lover boys. Probably by now or today, some people haven't heard of the lover boys because it's not a scandal at this point. But I want to believe about the grooming gangs, everyone knows by now, at least in Europe, especially in these countries that I am mentioning. Okay, so and these lover boys were particularly from Morocco. And I just said it, but it's like Moroccan men that cheated girls by made them believe they were their boyfriends, only to pimp them into having sex with groups of men. This was in the early 2000s in Netherlands. This has been going around for quite a while, so I really think it's very relevant and urgent to know about the issue. Okay, Islamist organizations trying to act as intermediaries in their interactions with the government agencies. This is another thing, and I put it in ignorant because I don't think European authorities, all of them, I mean, maybe some are ignorant, some are evil, but it's like, if they are only interacting with these people, the intermediaries, which are Islamists, obviously they are not gonna get, as in the people, the immigrants, asylum seekers, they are not gonna get the best, because these Islamists are not looking for their best interest. They have their own agenda. So the people are being neglected. And the authorities, they don't know that the Islamists have an agenda, and they just bend over them, like they just do whatever they tell them. So they don't help the people, and they actually make the problem worse. So this is one of the problems with ignorance. And again, if you're ignorant, it's okay, but once you receive the information, then obviously you're no longer an ignorant, and you will have a couple of choices, which is like being aware of the problem, or be part of the problem, I guess. Another example to showcase the how bad ignorance can be, but this is like a case for ignorance and or self-censorship. And it's like 3 boys, Syrian asylum seekers of 14, 15, and 17 years old. They shouted and insulted a woman called Vivian. Later, Abdullah, of 17 years old, punched and stabbed her multiple times in the torso. Vivian fought for her life in the hospital. During this hearing, Abdullah explained that in his culture, it's justified to stab someone like that if the family honor is insulted. He described himself as a model refugee. His victim, still in painkillers and with a 40-centimeter scar in her stomach, said that the nationality of the perpetrator plays absolutely no role for me. End of quote. The reason why I am writing this and I am explaining this is because it's very worrisome to see a story like this. For many reasons, obviously, the crime itself, but also because of what it goes with it. Okay, the reason why Abdullah said, or he thinks that the family honor was insulted, is because this woman told his brothers to calm down because they were making a fuss in the place. Like, I don't know, shouting or talking too loud. I mean, even if you get annoyed that someone tells you be quiet, you don't punch them. So, anyway, the reason that I find it very worrisome, and it's actually discouraging also, like, it's not possible that the victim is more worried about not looking racist than actually fight for her own justice. Because she almost died. She almost died, and still she goes out of her way to say that the nationality plays absolutely no role for her. It's just like, who cares? You are in painkillers. You almost died. You have a freaking huge scar. And why do you have to be worried about appearing or being labeled as racist when you are the victim? That's how insane this ignorance is going. Okay, another problem with ignorance, and this is from the authorities, is the prisons. Okay, before that, I have to say what is dawah, or dawah is the proselytism of Islam, for Islam, So agents of dawah are people that want to proselytize people into becoming Muslims. Now, in prisons, people get radicalized. We know that of anything, like petty criminals, sometimes they just go out and they become horrible criminals afterwards. In my opinion, prisons need a huge reform across the world. However, in this particular example, if we know the problem, it's easier to find the solution. So what is happening? The ignorance of the authorities is that in prisons, believing that religious education will benefit prisoners, then the authorities give agents of dawah access to Muslim prisoners. In other words, they radicalize them. An example. Omar el-Hussein was a petty criminal who was radicalized in a Danish prison. Upon release, he shot attendees on a free speech gathering in a synagogue. Another case. Benjamin Herman was radicalized in a Belgian prison. He was given a leave of 48 hours, and in that time he shot unalived 3 people in a Liège school. Many community organizations that advise the government are agents of Dawah. Their approach to Islam is quite fundamentalist. When you're ignorant, you make the problem worse, because then you're taking advice from fundamentalists, from people that don't want the best, nor for the people, the asylum seekers, nor for the country and the native population. So everyone loses. Everyone loses if you don't understand that you cannot hear what a specific group of people, the agents of Dawah, are wanting. Now, this is a huge problem. This is going to be a huge ASS video. Continuing, how they are taking advantage of the West. The Muslim fanatics use the freedom of the West, in this case the freedom of speech, to spread an intolerant fundamentalist version of Islam. What people don't understand is that freedom of speech ends when you are promoting violence towards a specific group of people. And that is what these fundamentalists are doing. Talking about an issue, talking about a problem, it is perfectly okay. It goes in accordance with freedom of speech. Now, they also seek to work within the system to destroy it and replace it with Sharia, which is what I already kind of touched previously. That is this court that discriminate women. I believe I have a couple of more examples later on. Some asylum seekers, especially the ones with little to no education, to no formal education, feel entitled to the welfare, and they see no reason to work because the jobs available to them are of the menial that pay slightly more than what they already receive. In other words, they are lazy. And if they are already receiving an amount of money, why would they work if they're going to receive just a tiny bit more? These type of people are not necessarily dangerous because they don't promote violence or commit crimes. However, they represent a big disadvantage to the welfare system. And obviously, they haven't contributed to that welfare system since they arrive as refugees. They are only taking and never giving back. The censorship starts when you don't want anyone to talk about the problem because you're so concerned about being called racist or being called Islamophobe or being called whatever, instead of actually worrying about the children or about the women, in this case of this particular book, that have suffered because a group of people with a specific religion, and it starts affecting what the free world has already achieved, and it didn't achieve it just overnight. So it's something that it must be protected. I have mentioned that in Germany, at Cologne, at New Year's Eve, there was this huge harassment. Now, all the victims identified the perpetrators as foreigners, and North African and Arab, and they were labeled as racist on social media. I really don't understand why this happens. Like, I sincerely don't get the logic. If a person attacks you, you need to describe them physically to the police, to the authorities, so that they can identify this person. And how you describe someone is by the color of the skin, by if they're a woman or a man, if what kind of hair color they have, what kind of ethnicity, if you are able to see it, so that they can go and find these culprits. So I don't see how in any way or form that is racist. To say like, this person attacked me. But apparently it is racist on social media. And they labeled racist the victims instead of actually caring what happened to them and actually caring about justice. Another example is that the police, this I mentioned, that they said that it was a largely peaceful event, which we know it wasn't. And then later on, as in later, the police chief confirmed that the attacks had been intentionally coordinated to intimidate the German population. The young men had coordinated the attack, I'm quoting, to the detriment of the kuffar, which are the infidels. Infidels are basically everyone that is a non-Muslim, particularly atheist, agnostic. Because if you don't know, Islam actually prefers Jews and Christians, which is over atheists. And it's funny because we have seen what they have done to Christians and Jews. Christians in Lebanon and in different parts of the Middle East, same with Jews, and we can look at what they did to Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the ones of Yemen that I forgot their name, and Iran. So this is another story. This is a story about just a woman that witnessed a fight. I don't know in which country. I believe it's still in Germany. Okay, so there was a fight that broke in a public area between an Arab and a Kurd. Okay, for those who don't know what is a Kurd or it's like an Iranic ethnic group. They are mostly Muslim, but they can have other nationalities, other religions, and nationalities, because they cover like different parts of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and there was a huge diaspora of them going to Germany. So there are a good amount of Kurds in Germany, and the majority of them, they are Sunni Muslims, but they can also be Jasidism, Jarsanism, Zoroastrian, and Christians. Again, the majority are Muslims. So anyway, there was this fight between an Arab and a Kurd. And there were children present when the Arab decided to slit the Kurd's throat and chest. He died on the street. And this woman that witnessed the event, or that heard about the event, listened to it, when she tried to comment it with the other groups of parents about how such a fight would have never happened before, when there were so many immigrants, everyone started being very defensive, saying that it had happened several times, that it always has happened, and they started becoming uncomfortable. So then she stopped her opinion. In addition to that, she also doesn't feel comfortable commenting this event with her leftist friends, because she doesn't want to be called a racist. Again, that is another type of censorship. It's like we can see two types of censorship. One where people, because you speak out, then they label you with this random stuff like racist, Islamophobe, bigot, Nazi, because now also people don't know what is a Nazi, and all this stuff. And the other one, that other kind of censorship, is when people, because you don't want to be labeled those things, because you are not those things, And instead of them trying to prove that you're that, you have to prove that you are not that, you know? Anyway, then you decide to shut up because you don't want to be labeled all those things. Because I mean, to be honest, who wants to be labeled like that, especially if you're not like that? So this censorship obviously encourages for people to remain silent, which means to remain silent about the problem, therefore to not even find a solution, and worse, to not find justice for these victims. Let's go to another example of censorship, but from the public. So there was this film called Femme de la Rue by Sophie Peters, and it is a film or a documentary that showcases harassment on the street of Brussels. She was wearing a short-sleeved knee-length dress and flat-soled level boots. And then the documentary, it's this woman walking dressed like that on the streets, and there is like a hidden camera behind her, I think, or with her. And the hidden camera obviously records what people around her are doing, in this case men. So they shout slurs at her, and it starts with "You're pretty, miss," and then the other one is SLUT, and another one is if I could, I would put it in your ASS. Most of the men that appeared in the documentary are from Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco. Because of the ethnicity of these men, when it was aired on TV, everyone called the documentary a racist documentary. Even when, I mean, she wasn't controlling the men. She wasn't, like selecting, like, oh, you're gonna shout at me. No, like, she simply walked, and the men that decided to shout those things were the men recorded. It had nothing to do with her trying to portray men of a specific ethnicity in a certain way. And as she said it, harassment isn't exclusive from one culture, social class, or background, but that doesn't mean it can't play a role in stereotypical beliefs or sexist behavior. Which we should know, as we have seen so far, is like, yes, women around the world, unfortunately, a good amount, have faced harassment or sex, assaults or abuse, ABUSE. I hate you too. So it's something that happens, but again, it's a disproportion. Like, if you have this, I mean, not if, when you have this type of men that come from a culture or countries where have a religion that tells them how to live, that promotes misogyny, you are gonna get that attitude in your own country, especially if you do not find a way to integrate them with the society, which we will talk about how they actually, I mean, a good amount of them integrate perfectly fine. So it's about also integration, but we need to talk about this. So what I found particularly evil in all these problems, in these crimes, is that the bureaucrats have had prevented this to come to the public because they don't think their population is capable to distinguish between criminals and immigrants who follow the law. This is another kind of censorship, of course, coming from this time not from the people but from the authority, because they are like, if we mention the ethnicity, then everyone is gonna become a racist, when in fact people can distinguish between a criminal and an immigrant that actually abides by the law. And by not wanting to to tell this to the public, they are exposing the public to danger. They are making their own population vulnerable to this type of men. And of course, this book was released or published in 2021. So by then they had been suppressing it. Fortunately, in 2025, people are talking about it, at least in the case of the UK. So it's not that bad. I mean, it is pretty bad, but at least now people are more conscious about it, aware of the problem. Again, in the UK, it could be awesome if in these other countries could also start talking about it, as in their own country, for their own country. Another horrible thing is that when it has become a huge problem, this has become a huge problem, because the only thing they have achieved is to make the research the problem. In other words, they distract themselves and the public from the real issue at hand. That is another thing that is very true. I don't know if I read it properly, but because the research has shown again and again, with numbers, with anecdotes, with all the data, that this is a problem of a particular group of people. It's ethnicity, but it's because in those countries, the religion that is practiced the most it's Islam. So the research shows it, but because people, governments, everyone is so freaking afraid to appear racist because you're pointing out a fact, then you start discussing about the research, about how the research shouldn't say this, should say that, or should distract themselves with other types of research, and no one is discussing the problem until now because I don't like to hear the truth, basically. That's the bottom line. It's like, because I don't like what you're telling me, even though it's the truth, I will complain. So anyway, then we'll continue. The government believed that the only form in which ethnicity is relevant in any research is if it talks about discrimination against minorities. True. That's the only research that everyone wants to hear about. Like how the poor, black, brown, non-white people are suffering all this discrimination from the evil white people. That's what everyone wants to hear when that's not the case. And we have seen it. The main victims in all this are white people. But who cares about them, right? Because the moment you care about a white person, then you're racist. That's how logic works. In Berlin, a Turkish of 23 years old, a man obviously, raped a woman for 4 hours. And she couldn't walk properly for the next 2 weeks. Nevertheless, the judge thought that the man might have thought it was consensual. The judge acquitted him. How is that not evil? And people don't want to talk about this. And one of the theories is that because of the history of Germany, is that Germans are easily blackmailed. I understand that the Holocaust was horrible, obviously. There is no doubt about it. I want to believe the Germans learned from their history. They did learn because they haven't repeated it, and because they are, maybe because of their history, that they are so, they try really hard to be like, hey, we actually welcome you, we are not as horrible as we were a couple of decades ago. So yes, we're not racist anymore, But you cannot be stupid. It's not possible that a judge will forgive a man of raping a woman for hours because he's brown. How is that not racist? How is that not condescending? Like, oh, because you're brown, obviously you cannot distinguish between good and bad. Or because you're not from a German. I mean, obviously, your brain doesn't work properly, so the standards that I'm gonna have for you are gonna be much, much lower. Like, bottom lower. Like the hell is pretty high, you know, compared to you. Because, I mean, you're not white, you know. How can you distinguish between good and evil? How is that not racist? Condescending other races or condescending the social status of people in order to acquit them or forgive them for their crimes, it's not only still discriminatory, but it's pretty evil. Like, there is no other word for that. Like, and also it's quite disrespectful for all the brown people that are actually honest, for all the Muslims that are actually honest. It is like, not because someone is poor, it means that they cannot do evil, or not because someone wasn't born and raised in a first world country, it means that they cannot distinguish between good and evil. So I don't understand what's the logic in all this. And let's continue with part of the problem. The people that censor are evil. I mean, obviously some more than others, and depends on the scale of the censorship. But why not we go with the Western feminists? They have come to the conclusion that imposing their values on Muslim communities is a form of neocolonialism. Brilliant. And then these women only criticize white men and excuse other men because they have been victims of racism and colonialism. So their logic is like, because you have suffered in life, then it's okay for you to behave like a savage. Because you don't know anything else, obviously you cannot understand what it is to hurt another person. And me trying to teach you how to treat a person with dignity and respect, it's gonna look bad on me, you know, because I'm white and I don't want to push onto you morals. It doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't make sense in the slightest form. Like, it's just like, yes, men of all different races, religions, and everything can be misogynistic. But I don't understand what's this, I don't know, like obsession of only attacking white men. As in, it doesn't make sense, it doesn't help anyone, and if anything, you're only letting criminals, real criminals, get away with horrible crimes. But let's continue. Conservatives and moderates are shut down and as right-wing or far-right, as we have seen, if they talk about women issues. Because the far left doesn't exist. You know, the far left actually know better than the rest of us. Sophie Peters said, "I think it's very un-racist to confront people with their behavior regardless of their culture." And I agree with her, like 100%. If you are actually not a racist person, then you are able to see the behavior of a person without caring about their ethnicity or their religion. You're able to be like, this man raped this girl. He is evil. Simple as that. I don't get it, you know, like, but apparently making such a statement, it's being a rebel these days. Anyway, some politicians find controversial to mention the existence of parallel societies. Some avoid saying ghettos and no-go zones. I have already mentioned that. And some of the phrases that we keep listening every time this problem arises is like, I'm not against migrants. I am from the left. I am not a racist. As in, who cares? Like, what you should care is about who is hurting who. And if you care about justice, if you care about the victims, then you shouldn't be saying like, oh, I'm not racist. I'm not like, why do you care more about being labeling racist than protecting children, than protecting women from being raped? Now, all of this, the ignorance and the censorship and the authority not doing their job, it's making Europe quite vulnerable. And this is putting it quite mildly, if I'm being honest. So I'm gonna speak about how is that Europe is being vulnerable to these particular groups and to the rest of the world. The first one is that they are restricting the freedom of women. In Austria, near the Bavarian border, a high school sent letters to the parents warning their daughters to modify their dressing. Otherwise they'll set off the sexual desires of Syrian refugees being housed in the school gym. Modest clothing in order to avoid discrepancies that can lead to misunderstandings. Because discrepancies and misunderstandings are curious terms to describe sexual harassment. Why you are making your own girls change the way they're dressed so that these people that haven't even gotten their proper paperwork, as in you giving them the residency or the refugee status, why are you modifying your population's behavior instead of modifying these people's behaviors? They are the ones that are arriving to your country. So this is one of the ways they are. I mean, yes, they are showing that they, as in the Europeans, will adapt towards others, towards a minority, because they are a minority. And if you're a minority, obviously you are a victim of this entire world, of this entire life, and you are the one that dictates what is right and what is wrong. Doesn't make sense, doesn't make the slightest sense. Now let's go to Sweden. In Sweden, at a music festival, Bravalla, in 2014 and 2015, there were numerous reports of sexual assault. So the next year, the police handed out armbands bearing the legend, police cordon, don't grow. Well, I don't know if I can say it. I mean, as in, who thinks that will repel anyone? Needless to say, this didn't work, since in 2017 there were 4 rapes and 23 sexual assaults at the same festival. In 2018, they designated a safe space for women to party without fear of harassment. Sorry for saying it like that, since no men were allowed in the area. In Germany, in 2017, police cordoned a women's safety area at the New Year's Eve celebration near Brandenburg Gate. Now, you might think this is not that big of a deal to designate areas for women. It is a big deal. It is a huge deal, because you are not addressing the problem, number one. And number two, which is very funny, is that you're doing the exact same thing as Saudi Arabia is doing. But while Europe is moving backwards, Saudi Arabia is moving forwards. So then now both can meet in the same middle ground place. What have Saudi Arabia did, or what did Saudi Arabia do in 2018? Is that they introduced a reform which allowed women to go to concerts as long as the sexes didn't mix. So until 2018, women were allowed to go to concerts in Saudi Arabia. as long as they didn't mix with men. Do you understand where is that Europe is going? Like, have I made it clear? Now, obviously, we're just starting, you know. One thing that also happens or has happened in Sweden is that Swedish people have this, I don't know how to say, tradition or cultural behavior, I don't know, which is basically that they have these naturist areas where everyone goes naked and enjoy life, I guess, as in read books, and I think it's in the beach. Honestly, I don't know. Like, I just know that they are nude, they are naked, and that's how they enjoy their life. And this happens as in women and men together. I don't know how there is like an age limit, as in or more than a minimum of age. I don't know. For me, yes, this is weird. I mean, if they do it, good for you. I find it weird, but because I find it weird, I wouldn't go to those places to begin with, because I don't understand it. I understand that for the Swedes, it's like I don't know, like liberation, freedom, empowerment, which I can understand it and even agree with it, but I don't see myself doing it or going to those places. However, Muslim men not only don't understand it, don't agree with it, but they go to those places. And when they have gone, they go obviously to harass and to touch. So because they're having several incidents in those naturist areas in Sweden, the I don't know how to call it, the population, the audience that actually go there have reduced significantly in the last couple of years because they don't want to be harassed. And even there was one area which it had become so badly that they even had to put cameras and divide men and women from in those naturist areas, when before it was mixed. And they did it because these men go there to infringe on the freedom of the Swedes. For us, I don't understand why the Swedish decided to do that. I would have banned them to enter, because you don't have to go to those areas. If you find it weird, like I do, then don't go. Simple as that. And if you're gonna go, then respect people. Radical thinking here. So anyway, let's proceed in which other ways Europe is being and looking quite vulnerable. Okay, child marriages. In Sweden doesn't recognize foreign child marriages, but the law doesn't automatically invalidate existing child marriages. Instead, they provide welfare, housing benefits, and children support to married children. Let me repeat that. Instead, they provide welfare, housing benefits, and children support to married children. There was a case of a man, 20 years old, married a girl of 13 years old. The municipal authority didn't remove the girl from those circumstances because if she doesn't want to voluntarily leave her husband, they can't force her. Months later, she was pregnant. A 13 years old girl was married to a 20-year-old man. The Swedish government not only didn't invalidate the marriage, they didn't remove this girl from that house or apartment or wherever they were living, because she, a 13-year-old girl, didn't want to leave her husband. Obviously, she wasn't gonna want to leave the husband, especially if we have seen how Islam treats women and girls. To her, she was following probably the religion, and maybe even him, he was following the religion. But if you arrive in a country that doesn't have those laws, you as a country also have to enforce the law. And by doing that is to remove a minor from her abuser. Plus, on top of that, the incompetence of these authorities is the result of that was a 13-year-old being pregnant. Okay, in USA, for example, between 2000 and 2010, children as young as 12 years old were married, around 248,000 of them. Okay, I know that wasn't Europe, that was USA, but it was important to mention also that how everyone, especially in the first world country, the developed ones, should enforce that children do not get married. In Germany, 1,475 refugee minors were married. 3/4 of them were girls, and 361 of them were under 14 years old. In response to this, the government passed a law setting that the minimum age to marry should be 18 years old. Sounds good, sounds decent, sounds like what I thought the majority of the countries had already. But of course, the left arrived. But the left and the Greens voted against the law because it was too general. Exactly what is too general about that? You have to be 18 years old in order to be married. What's the deal? What's the problem with that? Only people that don't care about children's safety have a problem. Now, another thing where Europe is being vulnerable and are the Sharia councils. In the UK, it's estimated that between 10 and 85 Sharia councils operate. Due to this, when women seek to divorce, they are sent back to abusive husbands by Sharia courts, which denies the protection the UK gives to non-Muslim women. In other words, if you live in the UK and you want to divorce your violent husband, you get the divorce. If you're a Muslim woman in the UK, apparently you don't get the divorce if you are with a violent husband. Why? Because I don't know why UK decided to allow Sharia councils to exist. I still don't understand how that even happened. So there is evidence that Sharia councils operate in a discriminatory way. They seek to legitimize forced marriage and making arrangements on divorce that are unfair for women, obviously. So, I mean, so now, well, the good news is that now we're going to talk about the solution. And it can be as simple as, I mean, obviously the solution could have short, mid, and long term. I am going to mention different solutions to this problem in different areas, but obviously we can start with something as simple as remove all the Sharia councils, the Sharia courts. Number one, that is of the Muslim world, not of the free world. 2, remove the child marriages. If they are living together, remove the children from those marriages. Let people talk, let people discuss the problem. Those are, I would say, the ones that can be done faster. Okay, so now let's go to the solutions. One solution, it's, even though I agree fully, I don't think it's that easy for the governments to achieve, but if anything, this can be for the long term, and it's to decentralized accommodation of refugees tended to reduce it, as in to decentralize the refugees. I would say, I mean, yes, I agree, but again, I don't know how complicated it would be. But for sure, it's one of the most important parts. And it's because the centralized accommodation of refugees tended to reduce the crime rate. Like, that's given. Okay, another solution is to evaluate the candidates of the asylum seekers. For example, the evaluation should be how likely they'll abide by the laws and adopt the values of their host country. For them to prove their ability to adapt, the highest probability of entering the labor market, to give priority to those that have the highest probability to enter in the labor market rather than the welfare. Makes sense. You want people that are able to work, that want to work, that want to give back to the country. Then, what migrants already know about the laws, culture, and norms of the society they wish to join. This is another thing. Migrants should know, at the very least, the basic things of the country they want to live in. Like, maybe they don't need to be experts in the language, but they should know that harassing women is wrong. Another thing that should be evaluated is like when asylum seekers are given health checkups, they should be screened by a psychologist too, in order to determine how willing they are to adapt. This, I will also agree. I also think that if they're gonna do that, they should also obviously have some, I don't know if it's regulation or requirements or something to the psychologists as well, because it can go both sides, like if it's a bad psychologist and let's say a racist one, then he will reject the majority of them. But if it's a lefty one, because he doesn't want to appear racist, he will admit all of them. So this is a tricky one, at least for me. It makes sense, but it is also tricky. There is one more thing that I haven't mentioned, and is that also a good amount of the refugees or asylum seekers that arrive to the EU, they lie about their age. Some say that they are minors when in fact they are not. And I believe it was Germany, the one that had like a system in place to double check or the age of the people. But that included, obviously physical checkups, even in intimate parts. And a lot of people that defend the refugees were saying that that was going against the freedom of the refugees and their dignity and all that. And it's like, I can understand it can be very uncomfortable, but you have to make sure what is the age of these people, because also if they are lying about being a minor, like they are gonna be it's gonna be easier for them to be in contact with minors, because they're lying. And on top of that, if they commit a crime and they get persecuted and they actually go to jail, the sentence will be lower because they will think that he's a minor. It's very important to know the age of these people. And if it's uncomfortable, sorry, but the authority, if anything, they should only try to be as polite as possible when doing that and as respectful as possible. But let's continue. Okay. Those migrants unwilling to adapt should be given a reasonable time frame to demonstrate their adaptation, 1 or 2 years. If unsuccessful, they should be asked to leave or be deported. I 100% agree with this. Like, let's say if someone doesn't want to adapt when they just arrive, obviously that doesn't mean that they will remain like that forever. Just like people can change for bad, they can also change for good. So given a time frame, and as she said it, a decent amount of time frame, you can evaluate properly the people that actually want to stay and be part of the new society. They are going to. Another solution to this problem is to fund the border enforcement, because at the moment of 2021, it was quite underfunded. So that's another way. You start by stopping the people right at the border. Okay, these are some of the examples that have already been applied in the European countries, which I also think are good solutions. Like, there is there is a plausible plan of action. This is in Austria in 2018. Okay, so Austria has made migrants sign the Integration Declaration, committing them to meeting obligations in order to continue to receive government assistance and maintain their residential status in Austria. Those who don't comply can face sanctions or can be sent back to their home countries. Now, the requirements for this integration declaration are as simple as the German language proficiency, values training, workforce participation. I think are more than fair and reasonable. And obviously, I assume they have a time frame. You know, it's not like on day one you have to be fluent on the language. In Denmark, children in migrant neighborhoods must be separated from their parents for 25 hours a week and learn Danish values, or their parents will have their welfare payments cut. In addition, curfews for under 18-year-olds are intended to minimize their involvement in street gangs. However, this policy was later withdrawn for being too strict. I believe it was just the curfews that was withdrawn. I'm not 100% sure, because if it was the first party removing the children for 25 hours a week, I think that is perfect. Like, that is, I mean, I wouldn't say just from their parents, but also from their own community. You cannot expect people to integrate and adapt if you are always keeping them together. So I think that was good. The curfews I can understand to be more debatable or controversial. I mean, I could say it depends on the details of it, but I don't see it as bad. And these are now the solutions in general. Is like the authorities are too lenient on criminals, for sure, 100%. I don't understand why. I mean, clearly because they don't want to be racist. It's better to leave criminals free than to be a racist. According to these people, obviously, not me. National and regional police forces dedicated to the protection of women and girls, LGBTQ, Jewish communities, and dissidents of Islam. 100% agree. I mean, I agree. And also, I don't know if I have mentioned it already or not, but people, well, Muslims that live Islam are at great danger. Like, they get ostracized by their families, their community, and in some cases, they get unalived, because that's how tolerant these people are. Okay, the other one is to stop the taboo on open discussion about the problem. I mean, this is the first step. Like, no solution will be able to appear, or I don't know, you know, like we will not reach a solution if we cannot even talk about the problem. SEX education to all people. The European Union should mandate SEX and relationship education. Yes, because how we have been saying previously, they don't like that part of the curriculum, and they go out of their way to make it not possible for their children to learn this. And if you want to stop these SEX crimes, you really have to teach these kids about relationships and how a woman, a girl, is equal to a boy, a man. Something that is quite clear at this point in time is that, I mean, and it has been for quite a while, the economic evidence is unequivocal. Liberal democratic societies are more peaceful, prosperous, and tolerant than those that permit autocratic rule. Western societies should assume gender equality as shouldn't. Western societies should not assume gender equality is a given. It must be protected. I agree with this. Like, you cannot expect that this problem just go away and that these people magically learn your social values if you don't teach them the social values, if you don't even understand where they are coming from. literally. And before I finish with this presentation, I thought it was also worthy mentioning that obviously not all Muslims are the same. Some Muslims that have migrated to the European countries have integrated perfectly fine, and actually it's them that are speaking out about this problem, about bringing attention to the problem so that they can bring the solution. A good amount of these Muslims, ex-Muslims in some cases, want to talk about this because they want their people to be integrated properly, because they understand the problems with Islam, and they want people to also see those problems so that they can improve, because it's improving personally and at a societal or as a country level. So yes, it's obviously not all Muslims, but it's important to understand that it's Islam. It's because of how Islam is and how it teaches like their subjects, that they have this kind of mentality. And if they want to migrate, if they want to live in a Western country, then they should understand that they have to change their mentality. So now I will mention the names of like brave people that have been mentioned in this book, that because are the people that have spoken about this problem and that they want to see a change, a solution for everyone involved, including obviously justice for the victims. This list, probably I will not pronounce properly the names, so I'm sorry, but I want to mention the names. And these people are Muslim dissidents, Muslim immigrants, and politicians. Some of them have actually suffered in their career for speaking out. So here it goes, the list. Seyran Atesh, Eskil Dal, Hamed Abdel Samad, Jaleh Tabakoli, Goran Adamson, Sarah Champion, Dusen Tekal, Efgani Tonmes, Mustafa Panshiri, Tino Sanandaji, Gulan Absi, Asita Kanko, Elham Manea, Nasir Afzal, Rumi Hassan, Mahid Nawaz. This one is not mentioned in the book, but it's worth mentioning. Ridvan Aydemir, and obviously Ayaan Hirsi. So, yes, to conclude, women are no less important than immigrants, so we should talk about the matter. One last thing about this presentation is that I really think that, especially nowadays, since this has become a big topic due to the UK grooming gangs, it's very important for Europeans to learn about the topic and to read about it. So Pray by Ayaan Hirsi should really, should be part of your list of books to read, especially if you are in the UK, Germany, France, Denmark, Sweden, Austria, Belgium. I think it's a must for their population to read, in my opinion. I mean, it's not in my opinion, it's really like a good amount of the cases were from those countries, and it will benefit your country more than anyone to read about it and to read Pray. So yeah,